All right, let's dive right in. We've got some breaking news coming out of West Africa that we need to talk about. Overnight, it looks like there was an attempted coup in the nation of Benin. We're going to break down everything we know so far, not just what's happening on the ground, but the much bigger question of why it's happening now.
Okay, so things are still very much in motion, but what we're hearing so far is pretty dramatic. A group from within the military apparently stormed the state television station to announce that they've overthrown the government of President Patrice Talon.
And let's be clear, this wasn't just some rumor floating around. This was a full-blown declaration, broadcast for the whole country to see. You had soldiers right there on TV saying they're setting up what they're calling a salvation committee to take over.
So how do we even begin to make sense of all this? Well, here's how we're going to tackle it. First, we'll look at the breaking news itself. Then, we've got to talk about the man at the center of this, President Talon, and the paradox of his rule. After that, we'll zoom out to look at Benin's own rocky history, and then an even bigger, more alarming trend happening across West Africa. And finally, we'll get to the real heart of the matter. What's really driving all of this?
All right, first up, breaking news. Let's get into exactly what we know happened. The story really kicks off in Cotonou, which is Benin's biggest city and its economic hub.
So the first signs of trouble were reports of an attack on President Talon's own house. People were hearing heavy gunfire in the capital, and right after that we got that wild scene on state TV with soldiers declaring the government was over. They even put a name to their leader, a Lieutenant Colonel Post-colonial, who they say is now in charge of this new military committee.
Okay, so to really get why this happened, you have to understand the guy at the center of this storm, President Patrice Talon. His presidency has been, well, it's a real paradox, a story of two totally different Benins, you could say.
And here's the thing. As shocking as this news is to most of us, for a lot of analysts who watch Benin closely, this wasn't a total surprise. Not really. And the reason why it wasn't a surprise tells you everything you need to know about the tensions that have been boiling just under the surface there for a while.
And this slide really gets to the heart of that paradox we were talking about. On one side, you have these incredible economic achievements under Talon. We're talking major new infrastructure, real economic growth. But on the other side of that coin, you've got this intense political crackdown. Opposition figures were being thrown in jail for years, his main rivals systematically taken off the board.
Now get this, Talon was actually supposed to step down next year, but he'd already handpicked his finance minister to be the next guy in charge, and pretty much everyone felt like this wasn't a real handover of power. Analysts were literally calling it a Medvedev-Putin kind of deal, where Talon would just put a puppet in place and keep running the show from behind the curtain. And that feeling, that the whole democratic process was just a sham, that might have been the final straw for some people.
But to really understand what's happening in Benin today, you got to look back at its history, because this kind of political chaos, well, it's not new for them, not by a long shot.
I mean, if you go back to the 1970s, Benin was literally known as a hub of military coups. It was just one after another. But then, something amazing happened in the early 90s. They held this historic national conference and actually managed to bring back democracy. For decades, Benin was held up as this incredible success story, a model for the rest of Africa. But now, it feels like all of that progress, all those hard-won gains, are just slipping away.
And here's where it gets even more concerning. What's happening in Benin isn't an isolated incident. It's not happening in a vacuum. We really need to zoom out here and look at the bigger picture, because this is part of a really disturbing trend that's been sweeping across the whole region. Just look at the map of recent events. The pattern is, well, it's impossible to ignore. You've got military takeovers in Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Burkina Faso, and attempted one in Nigeria. Now you add this attempt in Benin to the list, and it's pretty clear that what people are calling a coup belt is tightening its grip right across West Africa.
And one political analyst, Adama Gaye, just put it so bluntly, so powerfully. He said, "The time of military rule is back in West Africa." Wow. I mean, that's a chilling statement, and it just perfectly captures how serious this regional crisis has become.
So that brings us to the biggest, most important question of all, right? We've covered the what, the where, the who, but now we have to dig into the why. What's the real reason behind this comeback of military rule?
So yeah, if you strip away the specifics of each country, if you look past any single leader, what's the actual root cause here? What's the common thread that ties all of these different coups and attempted coups together?
Well, according to that same analyst, Adama Guy, the answer is, surprisingly and kind of devastatingly, simple. He argues it's because what these countries have isn't real democracy. It's all a show. It's just a performance.
So what does he mean by that? Let's break down this idea of a pretend democracy. Basically, it's a system that looks like a democracy on the surface. You know, it has all the props, it holds elections, it has a constitution, but it's missing the most important parts, the actual soul of democracy, real rule of law, good governance, and the freedom for people to actually speak their minds.
And it's this pretend democracy that creates the perfect storm for a coup. Think about it. When people are struggling just to get by, when they see massive inequality, and they watch their leaders twisting the rules just to hang on to power, well, suddenly the military stepping in doesn't sound so bad. It can start to look like the only way to fix a system that feels totally broken.
And all of this leaves us with one last really big question to think about. What's happening in Benin and all across West Africa? It forces us to ask something fundamental. In a world where people are demanding real accountability from their leaders, is this kind of pretend democracy just doomed to fail? Is it a system that simply can't last? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this breakdown.